Woman wins the lottery and hides it from everyone, determined to see who really cares without them knowing about the prize. With each false gesture, each rehearsed affection, she silently notes the truth behind the masks. But when they try to declare her incapable to take her fortune, Mrs. Eleanor reacts with intelligence and firmness, and proves that love cannot be bought. It reveals itself, or is lost forever. If this story interested you, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and tell us which city you're watching from. We'll continue. I promise this will be the best story you'll hear in your life. I've always heard that money changes people, but what no one told me is that sometimes money only reveals who they've always truly been. My name is Martha. I'm 68 years old, and this story isn't about wealth. It's about loneliness, silence, and choices that cost much more than money. I've lived my whole life with the basics. I was a seamstress for over 30 years, a widow since 43, mother of 2 children, and grandmother of 4 grandchildren. I never complained about life. Even with little, I found a way to smile. The house where I live is old, inherited from my parents. Simple, with burnished cement floors, a roof with a leak in the laundry room, and a cherry tree that insists on growing crooked. I always took care of everything with my own hands, until my knees started hurting a few years ago. That's when things began to change. My children, who used to come for lunch every Sunday, started disappearing. "Mom, I can't make it today. I have too much pending work," Daniel would say on the phone, not even bothering to hide his rush to hang up. "Grandma, the kids have a fever. Maybe next weekend," Karen would explain, while you could hear music and laughter in the background. I knew it was because I was no longer useful for anything. When there are no more Christmas presents, no money to help with the grandchildren's college, no carefully made birthday cakes, visits become rare, and the phone only rings when it's time to ask for a loan. Even so, I continued being a mother, doing what I could, lending without getting back, caring for my grandchildren when asked, keeping quiet when they offended me. Because that's what mothers do, right? Endure everything. Until one Saturday morning, returning from the market, I stopped at the lottery store to pay an electric bill. The line was long and I, tired, decided to buy a ticket. I didn't even choose numbers. I asked for a random play and kept it at the bottom of my wallet, without thinking much. That week I didn't even follow the drawing. I only remembered the ticket on Sunday night, looking through my purse. When I checked the numbers on my cell phone, I trembled. My heart raced. I had to sit down. It was all there, all the numbers. I had won. I, Martha, retired seamstress, had just won the lottery. It was more than $4 million. But before shouting, running, telling everyone, I stayed quiet. Very quiet. And for a very simple reason. I wanted to know who really loved me. That night I didn't sleep. I sat on the edge of the bed with the winning ticket inside the Bible. It was the only place I trusted. I closed the book and placed it on the nightstand, as if that would protect not only the paper but also my heart. More than $4 million. I could buy a new house, replace all the furniture, have knee surgery, travel, have peace until the end of my life. I could do everything, but at that moment I decided to do nothing. Not out of fear nor doubt, but because deep down I already knew, if I told them, they would only love me for the money. So I kept the ticket. The next day I went to the bank, properly claimed it, and opened a separate account. No card, no immediate transactions. I left the amount untouched, as if it didn't exist. I left there with my heart beating fast, but with a calm face, like someone who just went to solve an ordinary problem. I returned home as always. I took the bus, sat at the edge. Nobody noticed anything. "Mrs. Martha, are you well? It's been a while since I've seen you around here," commented the driver, an older gentleman who knew me by sight. "All good, Mr. Joe. Just the usual hustle," I replied with a discreet smile. I arrived, prepared my coffee with bread and margarine. Life continued as if nothing had changed. In the following days, I began to observe. Silence became my ally. The first thing I noticed was my children's behavior. Daniel, the oldest, who lived 3 neighborhoods away, would come to see me once a month. This month he didn't come. I sent a message asking how the children were. He replied with just a dry "fine," and ended the conversation. As for my youngest, Karen, she showed up one of these days at lunchtime, unexpectedly. She came, Gern already asking, "Mom, do you have a little money to spare to help with the car? Payment?" She didn't even ask if I was well, if I needed anything, if I had been to the doctor. Right then I looked into her eyes and asked, "Do you want help, or do you only remember me when you need to pay bills?" She made an offended face, said I was being ungrateful, and left saying I was becoming cranky. It was at that moment that I was certain. If I had told her about the money, she would have kissed my hand. And that hurt. It hurt more than any inflamed bunion, than any night. Spent with back pain. Why, she was my daughter, the one I carried in my arms, the one I defended from her father when he raised his voice, the one I breastfed even with my breast cracked in pain. But I stayed firm. The secret was my shield. You know, I always thought that grandchildren were pure love, that it was a type of love that came without interest, without demands. But I learned in the worst possible way that even the sweetest love can be taught to become currency. My oldest granddaughter, Julia, was always the one who said she loved talking to me. When she was little, she would sit on my lap and ask me to tell stories of my childhood, of the clothes I sewed by hand, of the times I made cornbread on a wood stove. And I believed that affection was sincere. But it only took me stopping giving $100 gift money on commemorative dates for her to disappear. And when she appeared again, it wasn't to give me a hug, it was to lie. She showed up at my house one day with watery eyes and a trembling voice. "Grandma, I need your help. Can you lend me $1,000? Fred crashed the car and we need to pay for the repair today, or else he'll lose his job." My heart ached right then, for the worry, for the distress I saw in her, or for the simple fact that she was here again asking me for help. But something nagged at me inside, a distrust that wouldn't leave me in peace. I asked her to come in, made some coffee, and while she was on her phone, I caught a glimpse of an open conversation on the screen. It was with a friend. And there, in a quick snapshot that the eye caught unintentionally, was written, "I'm going to try to get 1,000 from the old lady. She always gives in when we make a scene." Right then, I felt nausea rising. My hand froze, my soul cracked. I didn't say anything, just handed over $50 and said, "This is all I can do right now, my child." She took it reluctantly, gave a soulless, empty kiss on my cold cheek and left, saying she would figure it out. She barely closed the door before I sat down and cried like a child. I cried for the little Julia I used to carry in my arms. Cried for the adult Julia, who thought I was an ATM that smelled of mothballs. I cried because even my last shred of hope was crumbling. And when the tears dried, I got up, went to the bedroom, opened the Bible where the winning ticket had slept with me for days, and said out loud, "That's enough now. It's time to turn this game around." That night I started writing. I took an old notebook, blue pen, and wrote down the names of people who had really done good to me in life. There weren't many. A neighbor who once brought me soup when I had a fever, the woman from the bakery who always calls me Aunt Martha, a boy from the street who would take out my garbage without being asked. And there I decided, my money wouldn't go to those who carried my blood. It would go to those who treated me like a human being. It was the beginning of a plan, a silent, discreet plan that was completely mine. In the days that came after that night, my head wouldn't stop. I had already decided that I wouldn't leave. That money in the hands of those who called me old lady, who forgot me on my birthday, who only showed up when they had a problem. But I also wasn't going to start spending it all carelessly, because I knew well the value of every penny. It had been years of sewing until late at night, saving even on soap, keeping change from bread money to buy Christmas presents for my grandchildren. I knew what it was like to live with little, and I also knew that this money had fallen into my hands for a purpose. So I started slowly. The first thing I did was renovate my house, but without fanfare. Nothing about changing the facade or painting the outside. It was all inside. I replaced the plumbing, put new flooring in the bathroom, bought an orthopedic mattress for my tired bones and a new refrigerator that didn't sound like an airplane anymore. All paid in installments on my usual card, so no one would suspect. I bought new clothes, but discreet ones. I went to Donna's salon and got my hair done, but said it was an end-of-month promotion. And, most importantly, I began to help those who deserved it. The woman from the bakery who called me aunt with such affection received an anonymous envelope with a note and money to buy school supplies for her daughter. Mrs. Martha, a miracle happened. Someone left money for me at the bakery, an envelope with no name, she told me, with her eyes shining. Now I can buy all of Annie's school supplies. God is good, my child, I replied, disguising my smile. The neighbor next door, who always swept the sidewalk early in the morning and left a good morning with a smile, received a paid gas delivery when I found out she was cooking with firewood. Who could it have been, Mrs. Martha? I came home and there was a new gas tank at the door with a card saying it was already paid for, she commented, confused. The world still has good people, Mrs. Clare. We just don't know where they're hiding, I replied, serving her coffee. And the boy who took out my garbage without asking. I gained his trust, told only him that I had won a little money and asked for secrecy. I gave him a brand new bicycle. He cried and hugged me tightly. Aunt Martha? Nobody ever gave me anything like this. I'll take care of it like it's gold, he said, running his hand over the shiny red bicycle. I know you will, Peter. You deserve it. Just keep our secret, okay? Meanwhile, my family began to find it strange. Daniel called me one night asking, Mom, are you with someone? Are you dating? It's just that you seem different. I laughed inside. Different for him was synonymous with independent, and that bothered him. What's that, son? Old as I am, who would want me? I replied, feigning innocence. Karen came to visit me again, this time saying she was feeling homesick. She looked around the corners of the house, tried to make conversation about renovation, commented that the refrigerator was new, and I just smiled and said, God has been good to me. She smiled awkwardly, and when she left said, if you have any news, tell me, okay, Mom, trust me. Trust that had been buried a long time ago, but I kept smiling because the secret was my armor, and seeing them scratching their heads, trying to understand, was my silent revenge. One day I woke up, looked at the living room wall and thought, it's time to take this house out of mourning. That's what it looked like. Grey, dull, smelling of dampness, as if it carried the weight of loneliness in its walls. So I picked up the phone, called a mason from the neighborhood, Mr. Oscar, a good man I already knew by sight, and asked for a quote to paint the living room, replace the front door, and fix the lighting. What color are you thinking of, Mrs. Martha? He asked, already with his clipboard in hand. Something light, that brings life. Her cream, perhaps, and warm yellow light. I'm tired of these cold bulbs. He came the same day, gave me a fair price, and started the following week. In 3 days, the living room was transformed. Warm yellow light, cream-colored walls, new curtains. I even put some colorful cushions on the sofa. It was simple, but it was mine, a place where I felt like staying, without seeming that time had stopped there along with me. And as expected, the movement didn't go unnoticed. Karen showed up out of nowhere at Saturday lunchtime. Wow, Mom, what's this change? You even have flowers on the table. Did you win a scratch card or something? She said with a tone that mixed curiosity and irony. I smiled, took the teapot and served coffee as if I hadn't heard the provocation. But, inside, I already felt the venom flowing. Daniel called me the same night, with a voice too firm to be natural. Mom, we want to talk to you. Karen and I are worried. Are you hiding something? I took a deep breath. Hiding what, my son? I don't know. You never had money for these things, he said. Now you're renovating the house, buying new stuff. We just want to understand. Understand, a nice word for saying control. I'm living, that's all, I replied, and hung up. I went to sleep with a serene heart. The next day, I went to the neighborhood school, spoke with the coordinator, and asked if there was any child in need of help. She hesitated, then told me about a boy named Ryan, 8 years old, very quiet, good student, but who had been wearing the same torn sneakers for months. His mother is a housekeeper, works a lot but can barely pay the rent, explained the coordinator in a low voice. I made a point of going to the most decent store in the center of town. I bought new sneakers, 2 t-shirts, and a hoodie. I asked for them to be delivered to the child's house without saying my name. "Are you sure you don't want to identify yourself, Mrs. Martha?" asked the woman at the store. "Absolutely. What matters is that he receives it." I returned home feeling light with a warm heart. That was the best part of having hidden money, being able to do good without being flattered. But of course, the peace didn't last long. 2 days later, Daniel and Karen appeared together at my door without warning. With serious faces, they came in and sat on the sofa. "Mum, we need to be direct," Daniel began, adjusting his glasses on his tense face. "Are you hiding some inheritance? Do you have some saved money that you didn't tell us about?" I didn't answer. I just looked at them. "Because if you do," Karen insisted, "we need to talk. You can't make decisions alone and then leave everything to third parties." There it became clear. The problem wasn't whether I had it or not. Their fear was me leaving it to someone else. That's when I smiled, a very light smile, almost childlike, and said, "You worry so much about my money, but you forgot to worry about my health, my loneliness, my birthdays." Daniel was silent. Karen pretended not to hear. "We just want to. Make sure you're going to do the right thing, that you won't be manipulated," she tried to explain, looking at her own nails. What they wanted to say was, "Don't give it to anyone but us." I got up, went to the kitchen, and came back with a tray with coffee and cheese bread. I placed it on the table delicately and said, "Eat, because as long as there's bread here, I'm a mother. Beyond that, I don't owe anyone an explanation." They ate in silence, and that afternoon I understood that my silence hurt more than any direct answer. After that awkward visit, I understood that there was no point in expecting change. My children weren't concerned about me. They were afraid of losing money they didn't even know existed. They didn't want to know if I was taking my medications, if I went to the doctor alone, if I felt sad on empty Sundays. What they wanted was to ensure that, when I passed, they would get everything as if I were a chest with inheritance, a body worth more inert than alive. That's when I decided to put everything on paper. The following week, I took a bus to the center of town and went straight to a law office that had been recommended by an old friend. A young, educated man received me with attention. "Mrs. Martha, how can I help you?" he asked, indicating the chair in front of the desk. I didn't tell him I had won the lottery. I only said, "I have a saved amount and I want to organize a fair will, but I want everything to remain in absolute secrecy." He nodded, and there we began to write my plan of revenge. Or would it be justice? In the will, I left a symbolic part for my children, enough so that no one could accuse me of having disinherited them completely, but far from representing everything I had. The rest was divided with care. I left a generous amount for Ryan's school, that boy with the torn sneakers. I asked them to create a support fund for underprivileged children in the region. "Are you sure about this, Mrs. Martha?" asked the lawyer, raising his eyes from the papers. "I am, sir. I want other children to have what my grandchildren had, even when I could barely pay the bills." I reserved a part for the woman from the bakery, the one who never stopped calling me Aunt Martha, even when I could only buy a small loaf of bread, and asked to put the milk on a tab. I left a smaller amount for the neighbor who brought me soup when I had a fever years ago, and who never asked for anything in return, just company at the gate in the late afternoon. The rest of the money I left for serious institutions supporting the elderly in the region, to help other people who, like me, were abandoned by their children. And most importantly, I left a registered request that, after my departure, everything would be delivered calmly in a personal way, with a letter from me explaining the reason for each choice. It was my way of making it clear, not everything. That is, blood is love, and not all love needs to be blood. I left the notary's office with a copy of the document in my purse and a tranquility in my chest that I hadn't felt in years. Now, even if the world collapsed, I had already done justice. My justice. After I made the will, I began to walk more lightly. I felt like the owner of my own life again. I was no longer afraid of what would happen after I was gone, and most importantly, I no longer owed explanations to anyone. But it seems that the more we strengthen ourselves inside, the more those who live off control feel anger. Karen began to visit me more frequently. She arrived with that tone too sweet that, if you really know, you quickly realize is false. She asked indirect questions, noticed things in the house, commented, "Mom, you're different. Your countenance is more peaceful. Are you dating?" And she would laugh as if it were a joke, but I knew. It was the scent of an interested person trying to dig for clues. "What dating, girl?" "It's just peace of mind," I would respond, serving coffee and changing the subject. Daniel, on the other hand, entered a more aggressive phase. He would send WhatsApp messages with a demanding tone. "You're hiding something from us, aren't you? If something happens and there's nothing in your name, I won't swallow this quietly." Until then, I just ignored it. But this last message disgusted me, not for the threat, but for the coldness. I read it, took a deep breath, and replied with a single sentence, "What I hide is the disappointment you gave me in life." He didn't respond anymore. From then on, things changed in tone. The two began to try to corner me emotionally. One day they arrived together without warning, saying they were concerned about my mental health. "We love you, Mom, but we're seeing some strange behaviors," Karen began, sitting on the sofa and taking my hand, with a care she never had before. "People your age can be easily influenced," Daniel completed, standing leaning against the wall with his hands in his pockets. "We're here to help. We just want to make sure you're not being manipulated." It was clear. They thought someone was behind my different behavior. Maybe they even imagined that a scammer was taking advantage of me. But it didn't cross their minds that I had achieved peace on my own, and that's what bothered them the most. "I'm fine. Better than ever," I said little and opened the front door. They got the message and left. The same day, I went to the house of the woman from the bakery. I invited her to have coffee with me. We talked for hours. She told me she was trying to start a small business at home, selling cheese bread and homemade cake, but didn't have money to start. "It's my dream, Mrs. Martha. I've always wanted to have my own business, without depending on a boss who treats me badly. But in this economy, who gives credit to people like us?" She confided with sad eyes. The following week, I went to the bank, made an anonymous deposit to her account, enough to buy a new oven, a counter, and the ingredients to start. She never knew it was me. She only told me, weeks later, with eyes full of water, "Aunt Martha, can you believe money appeared in my account? Someone helped me and I don't even know who it was." I smiled and said, "Sometimes God answers before we even ask." And that day, I felt that everything was on the right track. I was giving back to the world what it had denied me for so long. Shelter, respect, dignity. But the conclusion was still missing, the last piece of the puzzle. And it would come at the right time. I should have guessed. When ambition takes over, the next step is always to try to take away the other's freedom. On a Saturday morning, while I was washing the porch and letting the smell of soap invade the house, the mailman appeared with a brown envelope. It had no clear sender, but came with letterhead paper and a notice of summons. My eyes took time to believe. Daniel and Karen had filed a formal request for judicial interdiction. The justification: behavior out of normality, risks of external influence, possible mild dementia and suspicious financial movements for a 68-year-old woman. I read each line with trembling hands. They wanted to take away my right to decide my own life, declare me incapable. For what? To take control of what they thought was theirs by right, as if I had already left this world, as if I were just a confused old lady who needed guardianship. But I'm not. And it was with that cold blood that I picked up the phone, called the same lawyer from the will and asked, "Now let's show them that I'm more lucid than ever." I had exams done, made an appointment with a psychiatrist, recorded videos at home, reading, cooking, registered everything. The lawyer heard my complete story, including the part about the lottery. "Mrs. Martha, what you did was astute, but we need a strong defense. They will try to paint you as a confused old lady." "Sir, don't worry, confused is the last thing I am," I replied, determined. In the days leading up to the hearing, I continued my life normally. I went to the farmer's market, talked with neighbors, helped those in need. It wasn't just for me anymore. It was to show the world that age doesn't define capability. One afternoon, I found Ryan, the boy from school, at the door of the bakery. He was wearing his new sneakers and had a huge smile on his face. "Auntie, now I can run without tripping," he said with that innocence that only children have. "And are you studying properly?" I asked, taking my bread in the bag. "Yes, I am. The teacher said I might even get a scholarship in the future if I continue like this." That filled my heart. That's what I wanted, to plant seeds of hope. It didn't matter if I would see them or grow. On the eve of the hearing, I received an unexpected call. It was Julia, my granddaughter, the same one who had tried to deceive me. "Grandma, is it true that Dad and Aunt Karen are trying to interdict you?" she asked, with a hesitant voice. "Yes, it's true," I replied without beating around the bush. "But why? Are you well, aren't you? Are you sick?" "I'm great, Julia. I'm just no longer willing to be their bank." There was a silence on the other end. Then she spoke, with a lower voice. "I don't agree with this, Grandma. What they're doing is wrong." That caught me by surprise. Maybe there was still hope for Julia. "Thank you, my child. You're young. You can still learn that love isn't measured by what you receive, but by what you give without expecting anything in return." She didn't respond anymore, but I felt that something had changed. And on the day of the hearing, I went with the best clothes I had. Discreet but firm, the blue blouse I got from the woman at the bakery, and the necklace I inherited from my mother. It was the symbol of the woman I had always been, simple but impossible to be tamed. Daniel had the face of a failed executive. Karen with that expression of a concerned daughter who never called on Mother's Day. When they saw me enter the judge's room, I don't think they expected that. They expected someone broken, cornered, maybe even trembling. But I entered with my head held high, with slow steps, yes, because of my knee, but with a firm look. I sat calmly, looked into the judge's eyes and told everything, without shouting, without getting upset. Just with the truth. I said, "Your Honor, I've lived my whole life with little. I raised 2 children with what a seamstress's salary could afford. I never let them lack food or love. But as soon as I got older, they turned their backs. They only look for me when they need something. They never ask if I've taken my medications. They've never come to my house to help change a burnt-out light bulb. Now, as they suspect I have something saved, they call me crazy." The judge listened to me in silence. The lawyer presented the reports, the videos, the bank records that proved I wasn't making absurd transactions, just living with dignity. And in the middle of the hearing, something unexpected happened. The door opened and Julia entered. My granddaughter. She asked to speak and the judge authorized it. "Your Honor, I came here to say that my grandmother is more lucid than all of us put together. What they're doing to her is cruel. Just because she decided to live her own way without depending on anyone, without giving money when they ask, now they want to commit her. This is greed, not love." Daniel turned red. Karen started to tremble. And I, for the first time in a long time, felt a warmth in my chest that wasn't anger or disappointment. It was hope. The judge observed us for a long moment and then announced his decision. And in the end, the judge said in no uncertain terms, "Mrs. Martha is lucid, conscious, capable, and more than that, fully able to manage her life. The request for interdiction is denied, and honestly, it's regrettable that a mother has to go through this." Daniel lowered his head. Karen left the room in a hurry, without looking back. And me. I left with a calm smile, because in that room, it wasn't just my sanity that was recognized. It was my story, my strength and my truth. In the hallway of the courthouse, Julia was waiting for me with watery eyes. "Grandma, forgive me. I was horrible to you," she said with a choked voice. "Why this change now, Julia?" I asked, still, with a cautious heart. She took out of her pocket a folded paper, wrinkled from being handled so much. "I found this stored in my memory box. You wrote it to me when I was 11 years old. It was an old note with my shaky handwriting. My Julia, you are the gift that God gave me. You have such a big, pure heart. I hope the world never hardens that way of loving. Your grandma who adores you." "The world hardened me, Grandma," she said in a low voice, "and I let it." We stood in silence for a moment. I didn't know if I was ready to open my heart again, but something inside me said that maybe Julia deserved a second chance. "Would you like to have coffee at my house?" I invited finally. She nodded, wiping away her tears. I returned from the hearing with a serene heart. The sky was blue, the sun was shining through the bus window, and for the first time in a long time I felt truly free. It wasn't just justice that had recognized my lucidity. It was life giving me back the right to exist without having to explain myself. Julia was coming right behind in her car. When we arrived, she looked at the house with different eyes. "It's different, Grandma. It's beautiful." "Yes, I'm different too, and also beautiful," I replied with a half smile. We entered and I made coffee. As the water boiled, I made a decision. I opened the drawer of the living room dresser and took out the bank statement that proved my lottery prize. I placed it on the table in front of her. "What's this, Grandma?" she asked, confused. "The reason why your father and your aunt tried to interdict me. They don't know for sure, but they suspected I had money and they were right." Her eyes widened at seeing the amount. "But how?" "I won the lottery a few months ago, but I decided not to tell anyone. I wanted to see who really cared about me and not about what I could give." Julia was silent, her face flushed with shame. "And I failed the test," she said finally. "Everyone failed," I replied, without resentment, "but that doesn't mean we can't start over, if it's for the right reasons." That same night, I did what I should have done a long time ago. I blocked Daniel and Karen. I removed the photos from the shelf, put everything in a box with care but without longing. Because forgiving doesn't mean leaving the door open for those who have already tried to knock you down. And with a clear head, I went back to living. I began to visit my neighbor, Mrs. Clare, more often, who lived alone and spent the afternoons embroidering. I began to frequent the neighborhood farmers market, talk with the vendors, buy fresh vegetables without rush. I started taking care of my plants with more enthusiasm, reactivated the backyard garden and planted sunflowers, because they always seek the light, even when the sky is cloudy. Even the neighborhood began to change the way they looked at me. Before, they saw me as the forgotten old lady. Now, they greeted me with respect, with curiosity. They said I had a sparkle in my eye, that I seemed more alive. And I really was. Because living without fear of being used, without feeling like a burden, without the guilt of not pleasing the family, is a type of rebirth that has no age. It was in this atmosphere that I received an unexpected letter. It was from Ryan, the boy with the torn sneakers. The school coordinator had helped him write it. It said, "Aunt Martha, I don't know if you were the one who helped my mum with the sneakers, but she said an angel helped us, and I think it was you. I wanted to say that I will take good care of my sneakers and study hard, because one day I want to help other people just like this angel helped us." I read the letter and cried silently, because in that simple note from an 8-year-old boy was everything I needed to hear from my family, and never did. And it was there that I realized, sometimes the family that's worth it is the one that life puts in our path after blood fails. The house, which was once a scene of silence and contempt, now flourished. It wasn't luxury, it wasn't ostentation. It was presence, care, color. I would wake up early, open the windows, put coffee on the stove, and the smell would spread through the street. The neighbors began to knock on the gate more frequently. Some came just to talk, others brought cake, dish towels, or just a lingering hug. Without realizing it, my house became a breathing point. It wasn't planned, it wasn't arranged, but it started to happen. Mrs. Clare would always come on Tuesdays to embroider with me. The woman from the bakery brought fresh bread on Saturday mornings and would sit at the gate, talking about life, laughing loudly. Even Ryan's school coordinator began to visit me, sometimes with a smile, other times with stories of students who needed some help. And I helped, always calmly, always with discretion. If a child needed school materials, they would appear in the backpack as a donation from the school. If a neighbor had their gas cut off, the tank would appear at the door as a kindness from someone who preferred not to be identified. It was never about charity. It was about giving back, about returning to the world the little bit of kindness that still fit in it. Meanwhile, The house's garden gained life. The sunflowers grew, the flowers spread. The children on the street began to call me Aunt Martha with the flowery gait. And inside me, something was sprouting along with all that greenery, a self-love that I never had the courage to cultivate. Once, a new lady on the street, Mrs. Agnes, approached and said, "They told me you're good at listening. Can I sit for a while here on your porch?" She sat, told me that her son wanted to put her in a nursing home, that she was no longer useful for taking care of the house or helping with the grandchildren, that she felt invisible. I listened to everything. Then I held her hand and said, "You're not alone. They've wanted to bury me alive too. But I'm here, and you can stay too." We remained there in silence, and that afternoon, the porch became a shelter. I never wrote a book, never went on television, never gave an interview. But suddenly, without wanting to, I became a reference point, not of fame, but of resistance. And deep down, that was all I ever wanted to be, someone who, even being forgotten, never ceased to exist. Over time, Julia began to visit me more. At first, they were timid visits, like someone testing new terrain. Then she became more comfortable. She would bring her college assignments to do at my kitchen table, ask me for advice about dating, about the future. And most importantly, she never asked me for money again. One day, she arrived with a different expression on her face. "Grandma, I wanted to say something. I know you're helping a lot of people out there, and that's beautiful. But I was thinking, what if we did something bigger?" "What do you mean?" I asked, curious. "What if we created a project? With part of the lottery money, we could set up a community space here in the neighborhood, a place where children could have tutoring classes, where ladies could teach sewing, embroidery, cooking. A place of exchange." I looked at her, surprised. "Julia, since when have you been thinking about this?" "Since I saw what you're doing. You could have bought a mansion, traveled the world, but you chose to stay and help those around you. That made me think differently about a lot of things." That touched me deeply. It wasn't just the project itself, which was a beautiful idea. It was seeing that something had changed inside her, that perhaps not everything was lost. And so in the following weeks, we began to plan. We found an empty lot near the school, made contact with retired teachers willing to give classes, thought about workshops, a small cafeteria. The Blossom space was born like that, from a conversation in the kitchen. And when construction began, I felt that I was planting something that would last much longer than me. On the day of the inauguration, Julia stayed by my side the whole time. She had taken over the coordination of the project with a dedication I had never seen in her before. "Grandma, do you think Dad and Aunt Karen will show up?" she asked as we arranged the chairs for the ceremony. "I don't know, my child, and honestly, it doesn't matter. What matters are the people who are here because they want to be." And there were many. The whole neighborhood showed up. Mrs. Clare brought her embroidered tablecloths to decorate the tables. The woman from the bakery, who now had her own prosperous business nearby, provided all the snacks. Little Ryan, not so little now, came with his whole class from school, and in the middle of the celebration, I felt a peace that had no name. I looked around and saw what I had built. Not with the lottery money, but with the decision to transform pain into something better. That afternoon was marked not by the speech I didn't give, nor by the plaque with my name that I refused, but by the sparkle in the eyes of those who were there. By the certainty that even when I was no longer present, something of me would continue to live. Not in the walls of a house, nor in the balance of a bank account, but in the hearts of the people who crossed my path. In a routine checkup, my doctor commented with the care of someone who doesn't want to frighten. "Mrs. Martha, you've been very strong, but we need to monitor this blood pressure. And these tests here indicate that it might be good to investigate the heart better." At the time, I didn't feel despair or sadness. I felt a kind of deep calmness, like someone hearing the clock marking that time is passing, but without panic, just with awareness. I left the health clinic slowly, the sun hitting my face, and thought, if my road is coming to an end, at least now I'm walking upright, without shame, without fear. I arrived home, sat on the porch with my notebook in my lap and wrote, "I'm ready. Not because I did everything right, but because I learned not to regret having chosen myself. I looked at the garden, at the sunflowers dancing with the wind, and became emotional. Not for the fear of departure, but for the beauty of the life that finally I was living my way. The days continued lighter. I continued with the visits from the neighbors, with brewed coffee, with anonymous help letters for those who needed. I continued sleeping well with a heart without weight. And one day, while I was watering the plants, little Ryan ran by and shouted, "Aunt Martha, when I grow up, I want to be like you." I laughed loudly as I hadn't laughed in a long time. Don't be like me, Ryan. Be someone who never lets others diminish you. That's enough. He smiled, waved, and continued on. And I stayed there with a warm soul because I knew, even if time takes me, something of me will remain. Today, I'm not sure how much time I have left, but I'm sure of what I did with the time I had. I transformed silence into strength. I transformed pain into lucidity. I transformed abandonment into choice. I am not a rich woman, not in the sense they expected, but I am the owner of the only thing that no one else can take from me. My story. It's here, in every scar I carry, in every sentence I wrote in the little notebook, in every person who passed through my door and left with a slightly lighter heart. That old woman they called cranky, that mother they tried to interdict, that grandmother who was used and forgotten. Today is the woman who controls her own life, without shouting, without bowing her head, without needing anyone to feel whole. If you've heard this story to the end, I thank you, because this voice here, this one that many tried to silence, now echoes inside you too. And if one day you feel invisible, discredited, or too old to start over, remember this phrase that I put on the door of my house: only those who know how to respect enter here. And in your heart, let it be so too. This was my real story. A woman who overcame abandonment by her own family, kept a valuable secret, and used her wisdom to transform the world around her with dignity. A story about beginning again, respect, and silence that shouts. The end of the story. Dear listeners, we hope that Mrs. Eleanor's story has touched your hearts. To continue this journey of stories that make us reflect, we've prepared a special playlist with equally moving narratives. Find it here, clicking to your left. If this story moved you, don't forget to subscribe to our channel, leave your like, and share with someone who needs to hear this message today. Comment below which city you're watching from and how this story resonated in your life. Turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any of our daily stories.